Sweet. All right, so this should all be recorded. Again, if there's anything that you don't want to be recorded, just let me know. And yeah. So first of all, my name's Daniel Stone. I'm a second year computer science student here at Durham. I've most of the programming I've done before coming to uni was kind of just in the form of making Android apps. So I've had quite a few years of experience now in Android development. So I've made a few apps on the App Store and for a company, which has been good fun. And it's honestly a really fun experience because one of the cool things about Android development is that you have so many different devices that you need to be building for. And there's always that one consideration that you need to, make sure you're thinking about whenever you build something. So that is essentially why I love doing Android development, and I want to share some of the experience I've had with you guys. We are going to be starting out really simple here on the news programming track. So I think we should be able to breeze through this because most of us here have programmed. It might be, I'll quickly do a poll. I've never done a poll before, so okay. Have you programmed before? Just so we get an idea of whether you guys have programmed before, and maybe we might be able to go faster through the through learning how to use programming languages. So sorry if you can see that. Okay. Cool. So a bit of a mixture. What we'll do is, we'll take it slow. And if there's any questions at any point along the way, just again, feel free to shout. Okay, cool. So let's get started. So the first things you'll need for this presentation is a computer and headphones, obviously to listen to me, and an internet connection, which we've all got. And then if you do have an Android device and a USB cable, that would be really useful. Depending on how far we get today, you might want to plug it in just to see whether you can push an app to it and have your first Android app on your phone, which would be quite cool. But no worries if you don't, you can always use your computer to emulate an Android device. So I hope everyone's excited to learn something new. So kind of as part of this new to programming track for Android study jams, we're going to be trying to build your first Android application. And to do this, you need to install Android Studio on your computer. We need to learn the basics of Kotlin, which is the programming language that is used to develop Android applications. You might have heard of Java being used in the past. That's sort of being phased out now for this amazing language called Kotlin, which is essentially a nicer version of Java. It converts everything into Java code so that you can actually, skip out a lot of the boilerplate or a lot of the extra stuff that Java needs you to do and just focus on a more kind of modern language. And hopefully I'll be able to sort of point you towards resources so that, if you wanted to take this further in your free time or once the whole course is finished and continue learning, you should be able to do that. So we're going to be working through the Android Basics in Kotlin course. We sort of go for this because it's like a really well-made set of steps. They're called pathways that Google has provided so that anyone can learn how to build Android applications. It's also quite up to date. Not all of it's been produced yet, but hopefully over time there should be more modules coming in, and will take you from not even having programmed before to being able to create an interactive Android app. So as I mentioned a second ago, we have units and we have pathways. So during this session here, we're going to be looking at the first 3 pathways. That's probably quite optimistic, so it might be more like 1 or 2 or just 1. And those 3 pathways are the introduction to Kotlin, and then creating your first app, and maybe having a look at layouts. And in our further sessions, we'll move along through these different pathways, and some of these are a bit longer. You're probably wondering what pathway is. Well, it's essentially a sequence of activities to learn a skill. So it can be a hands-on tutorial, which is called a code lab, or it could be an article, a quiz, a video. Some of these pathways have videos by Google that essentially tell you how to do things, and they just sort of add a bit more kind of, I guess, advice from people at Google themselves. So you don't just have to listen to me. And it means that you can do a lot of this stuff on your own time as well if you're interested. And there's also a little quiz at the end that you can do to try and get what are called badges. So if you get a badge like this, you can collect them, and it's fun. Okay, and on your profile, you'll be able to see all the badges you've earned. And finally, at the end of this course, hopefully we'll be able to provide like certificates to say that you've done the course or whatever. Yeah. So I'm going to quickly run over some of the main concepts behind Android development. I'm conscious that I don't think this is muting people as people join. So I'm not sure I can do that. We'll make sure that happens next time. So what we're going to do is, first of all, is talk about some of the key concepts of Android, and then quite soon after, we'll dive right in to some examples. So we're going to learn how to code in Kotlin to write Android apps, because, well, apps written in Kotlin are usually the go-to standard right now. And if you know Kotlin, then you're probably going to be able to find a job writing Android apps a bit easier if that's what you want to do. Kotlin makes developers a lot more productive. So that from experience, I spent my first 4 years maybe doing Android apps in Java, was really hesitant to switch to Kotlin. And I thought, you know what, one day I'm just going to just do it. I'll just make a whole new app in Kotlin. And I'm just kind of kicked myself, why didn't I do this earlier? So if you are wondering why we're not just writing in Java, that's why. It's because it's actually one of the fastest gaining momentum languages in industry. And it's number four on GitHub's most liked programming languages according to their 2020 survey. So this is the first pathway. We focus on, what is Kotlin, how to program in Kotlin, and some of the syntactical sort of sugar that it gives us to make programming a bit easier. To do this, we're going to be using Kotlin Playground just to begin with, just so we can have a look at some of the things we can do with it. The second pathway is actually creating your first app. So that'll be installing Android Studio. Hopefully you might have already done that already, but no worries if you haven't. Yeah, you just have to download it on the Android Studio website. We can put a link in the chat if you need to find where that is. And this is where we'll be essentially writing our code and our layouts and then combining them together to make interactive applications. And then if you want to run that app, you can either run it on your device or you can set up an emulator to run on the computer. And these are both fairly simple to set up. The emulator is pretty resource intensive, so it might be preferential to use an actual phone if you do have an Android phone to hand. And then finally, hopefully we will get on to customizing the user interface of an application. So that'll be what it looks like, how it interacts, and sort of the views, which are essentially contained within layouts that will be displayed on the screen. So similarly to maybe HTML web development, you have sort of layouts, which might be like a div, they contain things, and then you have views, which might be like p tags or input tags, which are like things you can interact with or they appear on the screen. Okay. These are some examples of the views that you have on Android. So there's the text view for displaying text, customizing how it looks, changing the size and the color, etc. And then there's the image view for images, and then buttons, which have standard layouts or standard designs so that you can adhere to material design guidelines, which help you make apps that look good, essentially. So I talked for quite a while here. I think we can probably just get started. Now, there were two ways of doing this. The first way was sort of I say, go ahead and just work on one of the pathways here. But I think it'd be really good so that we can maybe work together and make it a bit more interactive. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. We're going to be looking at the pathways 1 through 3. And I'm going to send over this link here in the Zoom chat. And we can all click on this, and I'll show you in a second where exactly we want to be going on this website to get started. So that is the link. Just grab that. Yeah, you might have to copy paste this into a web browser. So when you're on this web page, yeah, the slides will be available afterwards. I'll make sure to send a copy over. Thanks, Ben. So here we are on the Android Study Jams page. New to programming, we're going to click this. Even though you might have programmed before, it'd still be good to sort of get an idea of what Kotlin is like, and you can probably speed your way through the first section here. We're going to look at Unit 1. and then Introduction to Kotlin on the left here. So I'll stick a little link into our Zoom chat. Okay. So when you go onto this page for the first time, you can collect your first badge. To do that, if we click sign in to save your progress, it'll let you sign in, and then on your profile, it will let you create a profile and earn your first badge, essentially. So if you want to follow me through this, you can, or if you just want to watch, yeah, feel free to do that as well. So I've just created my Google developer profile, and I've added a badge to my account. So as I say, there are videos here if you weren't doing this in a DSC sort of situation, but I think we could probably skip through this and just have a look at the code lab. So first of all, we're gonna have a look at the write your first program in Kotlin. And I'm gonna walk through this on Zoom. If you wanna, maybe try it on your own as well, you can switch out of the Zoom tab or whatever and unmute me. Actually, don't mute me because then you won't be able to know when I'm done. But you could maybe give it a go yourself, or if you want to, you can move ahead and try some of the later ones. So essentially, there is a really cool website called Kotlin Playground that will emulate Kotlin on your computer. So you don't need to set up any build tools to be able to run the code. And this is it here. It's literally just a really simple function with a print line statement. So if you've done any Java before, you'll know that print line is essentially printing some text and then adding a line break to the end, so that if you run this, you'll get a result that will be hello world with a line break, and then that's it. Nothing else has happened. So if we have a look through this code lab here, it is telling us that, look, we've got this code here. We can now press play and we can view it down below. Nice and simple. Does anyone have any questions about that and how this code is displaying this text? No? Okay, I'll assume not. So we want to change maybe what this text says. We want it to say happy birthday instead. So to do that, all we need to do is change what's in these quotes to say happy birthday with an exclamation mark. And now, because we're feeding in a different piece of text to the print statement, it's now going to print a different piece of text as well. So we press play here and it's now going to say happy birthday instead. Nice and simple. So what is the actual structure of this application or this program? Well, first of all, Kotlin is slightly different to other programming languages in that it's really fun. And the function declaration is also fun. So in order to declare a function, similarly to Python, you use the word def, or like define. We use the word fun in Python. So a function is essentially just sequential lines of code that will be run when you call them. So this playground is looking for a function called main, and then when you press play, it's going to run that main function. And any of the code that's inside this block will be called sequentially. So it will do this line first, and if we added something else, it will do the next line. So let's print again, happy birthday to me. We're gonna see to me appear at the line below because that is after the first print line statement. I do realize that this is probably quite simple for a lot of people here, but yeah, just for the benefit of everyone, we'll quickly go through this. And if you want to kind of read up on this at home, you can. So Kotlin is a language that doesn't depend on indentation. It does require these curly brackets. So even though it might look like a bit like Python in the way that there's not really, if you're doing this in Java, you'd have to do like system.out.println, and it's all a bit complicated. It does look simple, but you still need to use some of the Java syntax here, so like the curly brackets. I might note that there is no need for for semicolons. However, you can put them in. So print line is telling us to print a bit of text, and essentially this is just printing out some text when you run it. Okay. If we wanted to do something else and add more lines to this, we could do it like we just did. One thing to note is what we put inside here has to be a string. So if we put in a number, we're going to have no issue. Sorry, it's got to be a string, an integer, or any other type of primitive data type that Kotlin allows you to have. So if we did put in just some random characters here and we run it, we're gonna have an issue because this isn't a number. And the compiler is looking at this and it's saying, well, I can't figure out what this is. It must be a variable name, but there are no variables right now, so it doesn't know what to do. So it's going to crash. If we were to put in a number here, we can either put it in a string, which will then print that out like we expect it to, or in Kotlin, if you just put the number in, it implies that it's an integer. So it's going to do the same thing. This print line function will also take an integer and then print that. It will also take a double. If you add a point to it, so 0.0 is going to now print out a double. And there's loads of cool things you can do with that. Cool. So now we've changed our first program. We could do a few more things. That was actually the first code lab. So nice and simple. We've done the first programming in Kotlin, and we're going to quickly use loops and functions to print a happy birthday message. Okay. So I'll go a bit faster through this because I think this printing is quite simple. It's just the syntax you want to get used to in Kotlin. And if there's any questions about, how do you do this in Kotlin, just sit them in the chat. You might as well ask questions, even if they're quite complicated. I'll try and answer them. So I'm just going to zoom through all of these things. We've got comments are // So a bit like Java, anything past a / on a line is considered a comment. So if we go like this, you're not going to have any issues because the hello is to the right of a comment. If you didn't put the / in, we're going to have a problem because it doesn't know what hello is. Okay. Another thing you can do in Kotlin is called string formatting or string interpolation. If we put text in quotes and we say I am, and then we want to put maybe our age in here. So we could just put in your age like this, but what if you wanted to have that variable? So we could say a value, a number, and then a variable is essentially defined as a value here. And I'm just going to call it age, and this will be my age, 19. And Kotlin infers the type. You can actually explicitly define what the type of this variable is, but a bit like Python, the type is inferred. If I wanted to define it, I can go like this and say it's an integer. And if we run this, it's going to tell us that the variable age is not used. Let's remove this just so we can see it being inferred. Now, if we want to replace this 19 here with our age variable, so that when we change this, it will also change what's printed, we can just stick a $ and curly brackets and put in like the variable name here, so age. So if we change this to 20, now when we run it, it's going to take in that variable and it's going to print it in here. So really simple. You don't need to do anything like an F string in Python where you put something before the string. Any string in Kotlin will work like this. You could obviously, if you wanted to display these specific characters, you can escape them as well. Like that. Okay. So now we've got our age in here. We might want to have this increase. So as we get older, we display a higher number. The issue we have is this value age is automatically a final variable. So it means that you can't change it. So if we try and say age is equal to age plus 1, we're going to have an issue because a value can't be reassigned. So in Kotlin, we all like to, well, what you really want to do is you want to make everything a final variable unless you know you're going to change it. So, I mean, that's good practice either way, but it's really encouraged here because it's very sort of instinctive to write val instead of going out of your way to change it to a var, which is mutable. So now we've got our age here. It's a var instead of a val, which means we can actually change it. We can now call this line to increment the age by 1. And it's now going to print out our age, which is now 21. Okay. So that's essentially how we use variables. We're essentially saying whatever's on the left is equal to, is assigned to whatever's on the right. Okay, I'm just going to quickly through the code lab to see if there's anything I missed. Another thing is, if we wanted to have our ages in days, so let's say we've got our age as a variable, and now I say days is equal to 365 0.25, that's correct, times by our age, really simple. And now we can say we're that many days old, run it. And because this is a float and we're multiplying it by an integer, this value or variable here is of type float as well. We're going to have issues if we cast this to an integer. This is going to be rounded down. It's not going to be rounded down. We'd have to probably cast it to an int like this, and it will round it down like that. So essentially, because it's inferred a double, we don't need to put anything over here. And casting in Kotlin is slightly different. Most things have like an extension function here that let you say double to ints, and it's going to convert it to an integer. So yeah, it's not like, I guess, JavaScript where you can just you know, do that automatically. You have to kind of be quite explicit in how you do this. Okay, so this birthday message, they're just doing some sort of kind of text ASCII art. So I won't do that. You can do that if you want to. Have some fun with that. What I will do though is show you how loops work in Kotlin. So a loop is quite similar to any other programming language. You have the for loop, so you could say for I in 1 to 10, in line I should give us a number. So I'm going to remove that now. Okay, so in for loops, it's a bit similar to sort of Python's range operator. This here is now a range operator. You say from 1 all the way up to 10 inclusive. And yeah, so that's what's happening here. And it's just operating in 1 to 10. And if we say now that this was a different number, like 20, it's going to run that code another 10 times. So this is one way of doing a loop 20 times. Another way is by using some of the cool extension functions that Kotlin give us. So there is a function in the Kotlin standard library called repeat, and we can call this with a number. So repeat this 20 times, and we can run some code. So this will go hello 20 times now, just like that. So it's, you know, these sort of things are really useful to have without having to write extra code. Like this is just one function call versus having to write maybe a for loop, and which doesn't make much sense if you don't know what it's doing. Whereas this is obviously just repeating what's inside the block 20 times. You could obviously nest repeat statements as well. They're just for loops or some sort of loop under the scenes. Okay, so that's, yeah, creating like a message in Kotlin. If anyone's got any questions about how you would do something in Kotlin, just stick them in the chat quickly. Otherwise, I'll assume not. And I think we can then move on to actually just running some code in Android Studio. Although we could do the quiz. Yeah, let's try this. Does anyone want to answer this first question here? What is a program?
Was this taught in the past half hour?
I assume not, but I mean, you might be able to figure it out from what I've been talking about, like what is a program. So it is, as I said, it was like a series of instructions that execute to accomplish an action, right? So
Sure, it's not option number 4.
yeah, well, I don't think so. I think it's too hard. Yeah, I know. God, we're going to have to get back to the basics, I think. So should we go back and do this all again just to make sure we have understanding? No, but essentially, yeah, it's a series of instructions that a computer executes to accomplish some action. This one we've definitely looked at in the last half hour. Which keyword do we use to define a function in Kotlin? Fun, exactly. Is that the is that our final answer? I think. Yeah, cool. Which of the following do you need to create a Kotlin program that prints a line of text? So what do we like actually need here? We don't need a comment because we don't need to tell whoever's looking at the code what it does. The same keyword. Oh, thank you. Great feedback in the chat here. Okay, so what we do need for a Kotlin program that prints a line of text is a call to print line. It is also a piece of text surrounded by quotation marks. We do need curly braces because it's not going to know otherwise where the scope of our code is. So we're going to include curly braces, and I'm going to say we also need a main function. And if possible, obviously include comments, but yeah. So what do we expect this Kotlin code to do? This is using, okay, this is not even using the array here, but well, yeah, we don't need to look at that. Happy birthday, that's that's not correct. It will actually just say 2 lines of text saying hello world, and it's a sunny and warm day. Okay. Okay, there's only 2 more questions left. So how do you modify this function so that it prints a 6-layer cake for someone's 4th birthday? So first of all, we'd change age to 4, because what this function is doing essentially is it's calling code that someone else has written to do things. So this print cake candles is going to print out however many candles you want. So it's being passed in a number here, and usually people put on the number of candles at their ages. So if we change this age to 4 and make sure that it's not a string, it's just a number, so inferred an integer, and we also want the layers to be 6, so we'll set that as well. Okay, and which of these options correctly calls the function below and passes it valid input arguments? So this is a function. What I didn't mention earlier was you can add parameters to functions. So actually it might be worth doing something here. So we can say function say, and this will take in a string. So this will be our message, and we do need to say that this message will have to be a string here. And then we're going to just print out our string. So we can do message like this, or even because it's a string, we don't need to put it in. Now, if we go say instead, it's going to call this function with this message and print it out. Okay. Val is not needed in the function parameter, sorry. Yeah, so yeah, actually that's right. You don't, okay, so val is included in some sort of parameters like this, but not in functions. We'll get onto classes probably at some point, and you do need to define whether they are whether they are final or not. The reason you don't include it here is because all of these variables are non-mutable. That means you can't change them. So if I try and say message has got, so let's say message is message plus there, we're going to have a problem because you can't change this variable. We'd have to copy it into another value here. So let's just say our message 2 is equal to that. This will work because now we're no longer trying to modify what's up here. Okay. So let's just have a look. What passes the valid input argument? So it wants a string, and then it wants an integer. So string, string, integer. You can tell this is an integer because it hasn't got the quotes around it. This isn't a string because it hasn't got quotes around it. This is going to cause a compiler error because it doesn't know what it's looking for here. Okay, let's submit the answers and hopefully I'll earn a badge. Oh, fantastic. So I've got the introduction to Kotlin badge, and we can click on next pathway to move on. So we've got like maybe 20 minutes left if people want to have a look at Android Studio now, and we can maybe just have a look at what it's like to build some apps on this. So downloading and installing Android Studio, hopefully you've done this already. If not, it's really simple. You just head to Android Studio like this, and then go to download it, install it, or you can install it using JetBrains Toolbox, which lets you keep it up to date as well. So you can either download it directly here, or I would recommend, if you use any other JetBrains products like PyCharm, you can also get it downloaded through this application as well. So yeah, they're the 2 ways of installing it. Cool. I don't think we need to look at this. Actually creating and running your first Android app then is quite simple. All you need to do first of all is launch Android Studio and then create a new project. So we just click there, and select a template. So I'm going to go for just a basic empty activity for now. So this here is just an empty screen. I'm going to click on next, give it an application. So we're going to go for test DSC as our name, so test DSC. This will be the name of the application on your home screen, and then the package name is essentially a bit like a URL. You can't have multiple websites at the same URL. In the same way, you can't have multiple applications on the same package name. It means that when you're looking for an app on the App Store, this is kind of the ID that tells you what app you're looking for. So if you ever go to the Play Store, that will be in the URL, and it's also what's used to prove that your application has come from yourself rather than it's a modified version that you're trying to like spread as malware or whatever. You'd only be able to update an app that you've made if it's got the same package name. So we're going to choose Kotlin, and we're going to say our minimum SDK is the lowest version of Android that you want to run it on is Lollipop. This came out in 2014, so it's already running on 95% of devices. So you'd probably be fine just building it for that. Okay, we click finish, and it will open up here. And we just let this run. Computer is chugging, but it should be quite fast to load up an empty screen because there's not much to build. And I'll quickly go over the layout of Android Studio for you all. So let's just change this out. I think the Dart theme probably doesn't look great on. Okay, that probably looks a bit better on Zoom. Okay, let this load. Has anyone tried running an application before on Android Studio before the session, or is this the first time you're sort of seeing it happen? Right, so now we've got the Android Studio editor up here. I would want to see if I can change this to be a bit more, I don't know, like, okay, I'll just use my normal theme. I think you could probably see this when it's on Zoom. I'm not entirely sure. Let's just quickly change this up. Let me know if you can't read stuff. I will change it to dark blue just to see if that will help. That's a bit better. Okay, so on the left here, you have your file navigation. Okay, to change color scheme is a good question. So in Android Studio, if you go to preferences, you can say appearance, and you can just choose a theme. So the light version and the dark version. I also use a custom theme that you can get in the plugins over here. Okay. So this is the main editor for Android. You have Kotlin file on the right, and you have application files on the left. What this is here is called an activity. So an activity is essentially like a screen, a window, for example. If you're talking about maybe a web browser, your web browser window would be the activity, and the application as a whole would be maybe Google Chrome. So you can have whatever you want inside an activity. It's just like a place to show information. So when this app is launched for the first time, it's by default going to show us this activity here. And when this activity is created for the first time, we want to set what is shown in the layout. So we're going to call set content view, set the contents of this activity to be the layout file that is defined here. So Android splits up the layout files from the application logic. So layout files are done in XML files. So if we hop into this, which is underneath the resources on the left, and then layout, and then activity main, we get this graphical user interface to edit the layout of this app. So you have like that. So main activity and then activity main layout. This is actually, as I said, an XML file, which has only one text view in the middle saying hello world, and a constraint layout that is essentially saying that the items within it can be constrained in different ways. So this text view here is constrained to all 4 sides of the screen. And that means that it's going to say, okay, I want to be in the middle of both sides of the screen and middle of top and bottom of the screen, which will stick it in the center of the screen essentially. So that's, yeah, pretty handy to have. I think now we can just run this application. There's not much, else that's needed to get an application running. So to do this, we can either run an emulator. So what you need to do to set one of those up is go to the AVD manager over here, create a virtual device, walk through the instructions here, choose whatever phone you want and run it. And then you're going to get an emulator running. The alternative is you can plug in a physical phone. So to get this working, if you have an Android phone, you need to go into settings and scroll all the way down to the bottom. So if you go to about phone and then build number, you just have to tap the build number 7 times, which will enable developer options, which will let you go into those and then enable something called USB debugging. So if I enable this option here, USB debugging, and press OK. This will mean that whenever your phone is now plugged into your computer, you're going to get a little pop-up saying this computer would like to communicate essentially with the phone. I'm going to click always allow. And now I'm able to send the application to my phone. So I've got an application to show my phone screen on here as well, just so that we can see what's going on as well on my physical device. So here is the emulator running with the application, and let's just get my phone. So this is my phone running with the application. So if we go over here, click play, and it's going to push it over to my phone. And you should be able to do this as well. And you'll see how Android takes that layout file, and these 2 phones are different sizes, screens, but the actual constraint layout will make sure the hello world's always in the center. So I've got a dark theme on my phone right now, so it's displaying it in inverted colors. If I go and sort that out, you can see that it's very similar. So that's what this layout file is doing essentially, is it's saying hello world needs to be displayed in the middle of the screen. Now, if I was to quit out of this and go home on the emulator, you can see that now you've got the app running in the background. And if we run this app, when you click it, it's going to take you to the same screen. And the reason for that is it's the main activity. It's defined as the screen that's going to be opened whenever you open it from the home screen. And as you can see here, this is where that's sort of set up. You say that on the home screen launcher event, when you try and launch the app, we're going to open the main activity. So if you have multiple screens, this means you can then launch only the screen that you want, for example. And then you might be able to navigate later on to another screen. So let's change what's on this screen, for example. Let's change the text. So let's go to activity main. We're going to say hello world text here, and we'll change the text on the right. So this graphical editor is really useful for making changes here. So I'm going to say hello Durham, that's the text, and we're going to change the text appearance. So we'll search for text appearance. Or it might just be, yeah, here it is, text appearance. And we will say we want a material theme, and we'll say, let's say headline 6. So we choose that, and now our text is going to appear as a headline 6. The editor can be a bit weird. Sometimes it's easier just to go into the code and change this. So we're going to say text appearance, headline 6. And now you can see it's become a bit bigger. It's slightly darker, and this will be good as a title. So we're going to say that is our title text. And then if we wanted to put more text beneath it, I'll just go back into design, drag over a text view item, and these little handles at the top of the views allow us to change the constraints. So I want this to be underneath Hello Durham. So what I'll do is I'll take the handle at the top of this text view, and I'll say it needs to be to the bottom of Hello Durham. And I also want it to be centered. So I'm going to say the left of the text view will be aligned to the left of the Hello Durham text view. And the right will also be aligned to the right of Hello Durham, which now means that because we've got a constraint on either side, it's going to center it. This here, let's just have it display the current time, maybe. So right now I'm just going to put in time, but we want to change this to the current time as the application is launched. So to do this, I'm going to take the item here and give it an ID. So this will just be our time view, for example. So we give it the ID time view, and we can now kind of reference that later and change what this says. We have actually also finished the second pathway by just getting the application running on your mobile device. So I say they keep it quite simple, but now that it's run, we can start changing stuff that appears on the screen. So this is our new layout. If we try and run this on our phone, we're going to get it updating. So we click run and build. You can now see it says hello Durham, and there's that time text as well. I might close the emulator just for that. Try a bit faster. Okay, so we want to do some code when the screen is made. If you remember from earlier, in main activity, we set the content of the screen after the activity is created for the first time. So what if we do something with the screen now after it's created? Well, all we need to do is add some more code to this sequential function over here. So first of all, we need to get a reference to the text view here. So if you've done any form of maybe JavaScript programming and web development, you'll know that in order to change the text of a node, you need to get a reference to that node first. Very similar here in Android. What I'm going to do is create a variable to store that node first. So we'll say the time is going to be find view by ID. It will be a text view. And it will have an ID. We're going to look for something with the ID of time view. So our time text view is going to be equal to whatever view we have with the ID time view. If we look back in our layout here, this has an ID of time view as well. So that's pretty handy. Now we've got this variable, it's never used. You can see it's inferred to be a text view. We can do something with it. So we essentially want to get the time and display it here, yeah? So to do this, we first of all need to actually get the time, and we need to figure out how we want to format that, yeah? So I think the best way to do that would probably be with a current time. It's going to be equal to a new dates object. Okay, and then we're going to have a simple date format. This is probably a bit simple, actually, a bit complicated actually, but essentially what this code will do here is take a pattern to display. So I'm just going to go for hours, minutes. I think that's correct. And it's going to take the current time and it's going to format it in this way. So we'll just get that as a string. Formatted time is equal to date formatter dot format with our current time, like that. So now we've got our string. We could print it to the console, a bit like you would if you were doing some sort of Python program. It prints it to the console. So to do that, I'm going to do some logging. So I'm going to say log I is an information type of log. So if you have an error, you can do E. If you have something you want to debug, D. Information I, and this means that you can filter out anything that is, not an error, or anything that is, higher than debugging, we want to ignore, for example. So we're going to give it a tag. Let's just call this main activity. And our message will be in onCreate. We have the time to be the formatted time, which is a string, like that. Actually, we don't need the curly braces because they're inferred when you put the $sign in. Okay, so if we run this now, and we have a look at the logs, which are down here, logcat, you'll see that when this activity has been run, we get this log here on create time 1850. Cool, so we have the time displayed. We just want to display it on the screen now, but as you can see, we haven't done anything to the screen. We've just got a reference to the text view time, but we haven't actually updated it. So what I'll do to change the text in time view is we'll take the, so we name this to time view, and we will go time view dot set text or dot text is equal to, and then we'll set the formatted time like that. So now when we run this again, what we're going to get is the time on the screen. So that's essentially how simple it is to get actual real-time information onto your Android activity. So yeah, we've got the time displayed there now, and you could obviously customize this. If we wanted to create a button to refresh this, so let's say we change this to be including the seconds. You'll notice that when we run this, we're only going to see the first time that it was when the application was launched. So what we want to do is maybe add a refresh button to get the time, get this really quick, but essentially what you want to do that, go back into your layout, you can create a new button, we'll just put it underneath here. We'll say it's going to be beneath time. It's also going to be centered around Hello Durham. It's going to be 16 device independent pixels. Essentially, these are kind of like pixels, but they're always the same size no matter what device you're looking at. So 16 DP, device independent pixels, from time is always going to be the same size no matter what device you're on. And this button will just have some text saying refresh, and we'll give it called an ID called refresh button maybe. And rename that. And now all we need to do is get a reference to that as well. So we'll go val refresh button is equal to find view by ID, and this will be a button. And we just have to go for the ID that we used for that button, refresh button. Now we want to do something when this is clicked. Quite simple again. We're going to use what we did earlier, and that is let's move all of this out into a function. So we'll take this out here, and I will say function update time. We'll go here. Now you notice we can't access the time view variable here because we've defined it in these curly brackets, which doesn't include these curly brackets here, so we can't access that. So what we need to do is we need to move this up here, which has actually reminded me that Kotlin has something. Well, it has very good null safety. You can't have a null object in Kotlin unless you go out of your way to explicitly say that you can, or you define it as one that can be null. So these by default will never be null. We're gonna have a problem here because if we say these equal to null or equal to nothing, because at this point when before onCreate's called, these things are, we don't know what they will be, so they're nothing. We have an issue here because now these have type of nothing and we can't just define them here. So if we said this was going to be a text view, and if we said this was going to be a button, you'll see that we're having an error here because you can't have null on a variable that isn't explicitly able to be null. So in order to fix this, we can either say this can be null by putting a question mark next to it. This could be a text view, or this could be a button, or it could be nothing. Or we can use another piece of Kotlin syntax, which is called latenit, which will essentially say that this variable is going to be initialized at some point in the future, and it will always be initialized before we try and use it. So essentially we're saying time view, we'll make these private as well. Time view and refresh button are going to be initialized before we try and use them. And we know that because onCreate is always called first. So now this is where we update them, and we can actually call text on there, and there's no issues. We know this is not going to throw a null pointer exception because of the null safety that Kotlin gives us. Finally, in the last couple minutes, we're going to do something on the refresh button click. So we're going to say on click listener, this code here will be run whenever the refresh button's clicked, and we'll just say update time. And that means whenever the refresh button's clicked, we're going to update the time on the text, and we're going to update the time anyway because we want it to display the first time the screen's open. So let's see this run. Okay, so you can now see the time is displayed on there. And if we click refresh, which I just did, you can see the time's now updating. So if I keep tapping refresh, our time keeps updating. So that's quite a simple sort of application here. We're getting time from the device. We're tying it to a button press. We've also changed the way that some of this text looks. So yeah, I hope this has been sort of useful to kind of go through how you'd go about creating one of these applications and just actually watch someone do it. There's obviously all of these study jam resources as well that you can use in your own time, maybe if you wanted to follow the two pathways that we've done today. So that is, we've gone through the Android basics and we've done two of the tracks. We did the introduction to Kotlin, and then we've started on the, we started on create your first Android application. So just quickly hop back into these slides. Cool. Yeah, so if you want to share what you've learned today with the hashtag Android Study Jams. Yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed sort of watching like how you'd make an Android app. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, let me know, and stay tuned for future sessions where we might make an app that will roll a dice. So that might be fun. Yeah. Thank you for coming and listening, and I hope that it's been kind of beneficial to everyone, whether you've programmed before or you've never programmed anything before, let alone Kotlin. Yeah, I hope that it's been informative. Thank you for coming. Cheers. How do I stop this recording?